We both are very excited about tight end Oronde Gadsden II, but maybe not as excited as the Chargers tight end coach who compared him to Darren Waller, maybe putting into perspective just how high his ceiling could be.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, Aronde Gadsden II wants to be the next great fifth-round pick for the Chargers after the Chargers did really well last year in the 5th round, and he wants to be that next guy, and he's putting in all the work to do so, showing up early, leaving late, and also potentially Scott Matlock wants to switch things back over to the defensive side, and that may open things up for another fullback to take his spot.
Our undrafted hero, Steo Clots. We knew that there was a way. Maybe the path is getting a little bit clearer. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. David, what we know Andy Bischoff most for, because last year he basically talked once, which happens with a lot of the position coaches around this time of year, and you don't really hear from him the rest of the season, was him saying that Hayden Hurst had a chance to be, one of the elite tight ends if he could stay healthy, and it never happened, and it was a little bit maybe hyperbolic at the time and never came to fruition. But still, if you're going to compare Oronde Gadsden II to Darren Waller, who was basically the most dominant receiving tight end in the NFL over a couple of seasons, that's going to be a big thing. And I think from a physical perspective, from a stylistic perspective, you can see it. But this is what he had to say. I know it's a huge forecast, but I was fortunate enough to coach Darren Waller, and Darren Waller was a receiver in college, and we turned him into a tight end. He's got some of those traits. It's way early, but he's twitchy, he separates, he does some really good things in the pass game, and I think he's become more comfortable in our system over the last 4 or 5 days. I think people are beginning to see that. And David, it is crazy, because it is, the pads haven't come on, and we don't actually have a real chance to evaluate him as a complete tight end, a complete football player. But man, he says those things, right? And it's hard not to get super excited because, like I said, physically very, very similar in size coming out to what Darren Waller was. And Darren Waller obviously didn't convert to being a tight end until a couple of seasons in the league. So when he says that, my ears perk up, man. I'm already excited about him. But man, that's really, really high praise.
It's extremely high praise, but it also seems to me like whenever Andy Bischoff gets in front of a microphone, he is going to say something that's going to make you pay attention. He's like, hey, I get my one chance, my one opportunity to get in front of a mic for this season. I'm going to make sure people remember my words. And
I don't know, man, because it definitely felt like he was thinking about, well, last year I said this, so let me put a couple of way earlies in there this time, because last year that one didn't work out for me so well.
Yeah, he's hedging a little bit more for sure this year, but still, like, to be able to bring up that type of name, and also just to put it in perspective, like I know you said, one of the best tight ends over 2 seasons. We're talking about ridiculous production here. 2 seasons of 90-plus catches and 2 seasons of 1,100-plus receiving yards from a tight end. Yeah. That is a guy who was the central focal point of the offense and absolutely took it and ran with it. That's the type of person that Andy Bischoff is comparing Oronde Gadsden II to. And yes, it is very much way too early, but these guys have watched football and coached football for many, many years. They can see the mannerisms. They can see the speed. They can see the quick twitch. It's either there or it's not. And it seems to me like everybody is saying the same thing. This guy has what it takes to be a weapon immediately.
Well, and I think to me it's about the reason why they drafted him, right? They saw these things in him before they drafted him. And the reason he brings them up is obviously not only did Bischoff, work with him in 2015 when the Ravens drafted him, Darren Waller, that is, when he was a wide receiver and they took him in the 6th round. But he also probably, I'm sure, was a part of the Giants trading for him in 2023 when Andy Bischoff was the tight ends coach there. So very familiar with that kind of game, very familiar with that type of player. Obviously, Isaiah Likely, another player that the Ravens drafted that has somewhat of a similar build, but is more proficient as a blocker. But Darren Waller did run a 4.46. Now, he was a wide receiver at that point. He wasn't a tight end or working to be a tight end at that point. Aronde Gadsden ran a 4.65, so a little bit different there. Darren Waller more explosive with his grades too, but obviously was trying to be a wide receiver at that point. And also when he came into the league, got suspended 4 games for substance abuse issues and then got suspended all of 2017. So there was a reason why it took a little while for Darren Waller to kind of find his groove, and he didn't end up finding it until he was with the Raiders. But I think the other part of it was just like he made a huge impact while never really being a great run blocker, which is the one thing that he is going to be judged on the most in what we're going to talk about here. But he ranked 79 out of 85 eligible tight ends with 100 blocking snaps in 2020, 87 out of 88 in 21. Those were the 2 years he dominated the entire league. So he was not off of the field. But anyways, you take this with a grain of salt. But I think we all see kind of in flashes, hey, this dude does have a chance to be a really special receiving tight end at the very least. And we've said that all along. But as we know, this success, the ceiling that he has, the ability to be a 3-down player, which Bischoff says that he wants to be, is going to be very linked with how well he's able to block David. And that is something that both he and Andy Bischoff talked about on Monday.
Yeah, they absolutely did. Andy Bischoff said, I think he's better than we thought. I think his fundamentals are clean. His want to is there. All you ever ask of a blocker is willingness, and we can take it from there. If they have the willingness, then you got to hone in on the fundamentals and help them grow. And he also went on to talk about, hey, it's also up to us to make sure that we're putting him in the right positions to, be successful as a blocker. We're not going to take a 250-pound tight end and try to block, a 300-pound defensive line or defensive end. That's just not smart. And I appreciated the fact that Coach Bischoff said that as well. And also Aronde Gadsden said of his blocking himself, the whole draft process, the thing I really got to work on is getting my steps right, my hands and my hat in the right place, being able to drive strength through that play. Last year was really my first year doing it. So he acknowledges like, hey, there are things that I need to get better at. I've only done this for a short period of time, but I want to get better. I'm hungry to get better, and I'm going to show that I'm capable of being that type of blocker. Because if he wants to be on the field, especially in this offense, with this offensive coordinator, with this head coach, he's going to have to block. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think for me, this is the biggest part. Like, he doesn't have to be a great blocker. He just doesn't. And that's kind of why I was so surprised that he dropped to the 5th round, was just because, like, me and you watch a ton of prospects. Like, we see an insane amount of bad blocking tight ends, and a lot of those dudes get drafted, and a lot of those dudes get drafted a lot higher than Aronde Gadsden II does. Like, I mean, look at a Terrence Ferguson, right? 2nd round pick. That dude was not a good blocker. I watched him, right? He very explosive, great receiver. Not a good blocker. I mean, Harold Fannin, same thing. Had the same kind of issues as far as the thought of him potentially being a 3-down tight end and being a full-time kind of a blocking tight end that can be out there, and you're not going to kind of give away what the offense is doing, because that's really what it's about. It's being able to run the entire offense with him out there and not knowing or being able to key in on, oh, hey, Aronde Gadsden's on the field. This is a passing play, right? Like, that is what it is. And you have to be able to be good enough to be able to not kind of let the defense know what you're doing. And I do think what Andy Bischoff said that was also important is saying, can he block a second level player? He has to. Got to be able to block a second level player. That is something there where it's like, you might not be able to take, like you said, a 300-pound defensive end off the line of scrimmage and be able to wall him off and open up a huge running lane. But you have to be able to hit guys on the move and be able to move around the formation, use your athleticism as a strength to be able to go hit those guys at the second level. And it is up to the Chargers to be able to make sure they're using him the correct way. He might not ever get to that point, but I do think it's good news, up to 250 pounds, getting a little bit bigger, as Bischoff is saying there, bigger than they thought he was, a better blocker than he thought he was coming into it, right? And when they get out of there on the sled, he's working just as hard as the rest of the guys. So really great quotes from both of those guys. You can tell how much blocking is at the forefront of where he needs to be that next level type of player, to reach what his potential ceiling is. And shout out to Alex Ensdorf for doing the Lord's work and transcribing a lot of the quotes from the press conferences.
When it comes to the transcripts.
Been doing a great job with all of that. But I think the other thing that makes you excited about Aronde Gadsden is that he's putting in the work. Because it's one thing to want to be great, but he's actually doing that. And when you talk about first one in, last one out, I mean, he's living that maybe a little bit too literally, but so are the rest of the rookies, according to Trey Harris. So we're going to get into all that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you want to experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering, especially in the finals, and Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games, and prices on the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Gametime is a total game changer. I mean, that is, for me, what separates Gametime is just always knowing what the exact price you're going to pay, knowing what the view is going to be for your seat, especially if you're going to a playoff game or a big moment like that, but also the Gametime guarantee, knowing that you're getting the best deal, and if you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. And Gametime makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy, and you'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. And I remember looking at Chargers games, you could almost always find a ticket for less than $100 with Gametime, and especially Gametime picks. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Dave, we have more to get into from some good sound bites we got on Monday from Oronde Gadsden II and Andy Bischoff, and also Trey Harris. It was nice hearing from him at the podium as well, even if it was a shorter one. But last week we heard Jim Harbaugh saying about Oronde Gadsden, especially after that big day that he had, the 7-catch day that he had with multiple 20-plus yard catches, that really put him on the map. And when we did the show last week, where we had to kind of record an early show, which is why we did one on Thursday instead of Friday. And then you have Jim Harbaugh saying, like, we literally have to, like, kick this dude out of the building because he's just in here so much. And, I mean, that was something that was talked about. Oronde Gadsden saying that he gets to practice at 5:30 a.m., or at least gets to the facility. And Daniel Popper saying that the first meetings don't start until 8 a.m., and that's when the special teams get together. 8 a.m., this dude is getting there at 5:30 a.m. You want to talk about first one in? That's what the first one in looks like, right? And also, the other thing is he said that it's partially because he's still stuck on Eastern time. And so, like, he can't sleep as much, and he keeps waking up super, super early, and, like, he can't go back to sleep. So what better to do than go get an early start on the day and, you know, go out there and get really, really important kind of mental reps out on the field, which he's been able to do. And another reason why you see all these things and you're putting them together and you're wondering, can this dude kind of take his game and let it translate to the NFL level? And it's just kind of another box check that says, hey, he's willing to put the work in to get there.
Well, like this is the things that's all within his control, right? Like being able to show up, being able to utilize the multi-$100 million facility, the Bolt, that has literally every single thing you could ever ask for as a professional athlete when it comes to getting better at this game of football. I mean, there is everything. Also, there's Ben Herbert that said, hey, you know, you want to walk through, you know, those plays, whether it's a 1 tight end set, whether it's a two tight end set, walk through those plays, get better at it. That's how you're going to be able to master the playbook. Once you have the playbook down, you can start playing fast. Things are going to slow down for you because you know exactly what's going on, and you have to catch up. I mean, that we've heard about it from the coaches multiple times. These guys are behind, and that's going to happen naturally. So being able to go in and get there as early as possible to be able to kind of counteract the fact that you missed some of that time being a draft pick, I think is doing everything he possibly can to be able to, whenever he gets to training camp, to put his best foot forward and go out there and play as fast as possible.
One of the benefits also just to being the son of a professional athlete, right? This is a dude who grew up
knowing
and
what it
actually
takes
got to see exactly the type of work that you have to put in to make it work at the highest level. And that is something you can't necessarily teach. It's something that you're kind of born into to a certain extent. And that doesn't, you know, guarantee you anything. Ask Michael Jordan Jr., right? Like, it doesn't mean that you're going to be great, but this is the kind of other important part. You know, as Andy Bischoff saying, he's an impressive learner. He's so coachable. He's a tell him one time guy, and he makes the adjustment. And as Oronde Gadsden is out there, 1 out of the 22 players that should be on the field at the same time, I think it's crazy. I mean, he's saying, hey, if it's a 2 tight end set, I'm doing 1 play as 1 tight end and 1 play as the next tight end. And then when the time comes, like, some of these guys are doing this for their first time. I feel like I've done it 20 times, 25 times. And what can that do for me? And Trey Harris, I think, another kind of really nice thing to hear from him is like him giving credit to all the rookies and just saying, hey, like, we're doing what we can, and we're all guys that are willing to put in the extra work.
Yeah, I mean, I love the quote. He said that's one of the things I'd give praise for the entire rookie class. We're always looking for extra to do. We all understand that we have to play catch up in this situation. We're all looking to find a way to contribute to the team. And I kind of feel like that might be a little bit of a response to what the wide receiver coach, Coach Lyle, said as far as them kind of being behind the 8 ball a little
out
bit.
Of shape.
Yeah, being a little bit out of shape. I mean, obviously, Trey Harris and, any of the other rookies are never going to admit to that. But they are saying, like, hey, we're a little bit behind. We got to do everything we can to be able to catch up. And, Trey Harris, whenever he's talking, just talking about how just effusive his praise is for Justin Herbert. And it's like how, incredibly talented he is and how anytime he throws him the football, it's right on the money. And that if it's right on the money, he's going to catch it.
Yeah, for sure. It was, it's always funny hearing, rookies and stuff talk about the first time playing with Justin Herbert, just because you can kind of tell how floored they are, especially coming from collegiate quarterbacks to, the NFL level in general. Not only that, and then you get, a top 5, top 7 quarterback throwing you the football. But just from, a work standpoint and what he's been working on, he said the biggest point of emphasis for him he's been working on, to be honest with you, is just making sure whenever I get this play call, boom, it sticks in my brain. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not second guessing myself. And I do think that this is all kind of just part of the culture that the Chargers have built, because listen to what Andy Bischoff says here when he says it's not always like this. He said rookies are usually great, but you run across rookies who have moments of like, yeah, I got this figured out. Talking about Oronde Gadsden, he's just not that guy. He wants to listen. He wants to learn, and you see it right away transfer. And that's what it takes, because how many rookies have we seen that just disappear in their first year? I mean, you look at a couple even from last year, someone like a Justin Aboigbe, someone like a Brendan Rice, and then especially in the case of Brendan Rice, like, look at why he didn't play, at least in part, right? Like, that was a really bad moment. These guys are trying to avoid those.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need to do. I mean, and this right here, the work that you're putting in to make sure that you're mastering the playbook and knowing what your responsibilities are, knowing what everyone else around you is supposed to do, that's how you avoid those mental mistakes that we so clearly saw when it came to Brendan Rice. He didn't know where he was supposed to be. He was supposed to motion over, and they had to call a timeout, get him off the field, and guess what? That was the last time you saw him on the football field on the offense. And that right there is just a glaring, very clear example that you can avoid if you do everything you can within your power to master what you are supposed to do out there. That way, that gives confidence to the coaches that when they put you on the field, you're going to do what they expect you to do.
The worst thing you could do is think you have it all figured out, in my opinion. But it just feels like, hey, if you want to be a Landon McConkey, if you want to be a Joe All, obviously you have to be supremely talented.
Of course.
Too. But that's what the Chargers are saying is there is talent. There are guys. I mean, Aronde Gadsden, super talented. Trey Harris, super talented. They're willing to also put in the work. That's how you become impact players in year one. But it was the first time we've heard from Andy Bischoff in a while, and I thought it was really cool what he had to say about Tyler Conklin too, David, especially just because it continues a theme here that we've heard from basically anyone asked about Tyler Conklin, just about how excited they are for this dude to be in the room.
Yeah, and I really love the points that he brought up when he was talking about him too. He said, really great find. I give all the credit to Joe Ortiz. Tyler has been undervalued every place he's been. I think he had literally 7 quarterbacks in New York. He is a pro in every way, really wonderful addition. And you saw that, and you see it in the stats and just what he brings to the table, being incredibly durable, being very available, having very sure hands. And yeah, just everybody from a personality standpoint is loving this guy, loving what he brings to the table. And I think it's definitely a big missing piece for this Chargers tight end room to bring in a guy who's kind of that well-rounded type of veteran tight end who's been there, done that, has had success, and I think really still feel like is a guy who's ready to break out, to play with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and clearly the best quarterback he's ever played with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's either Kirk Cousins or a washed-up Aaron Rodgers for him. I mean, at least as far as the quarterbacks that he had. But, and the thing is, too, is, I love Oronde Gadsden.
Yeah.
But I also think Tyler Conklin could have a big year, and that's what kind of makes it tough to kind of project this room because, I mean, Will Dissly obviously had the most impressive season of his career last year, too. But I just think overall kind of what it shows, David, is just like, man, this Chargers tight end room could be a huge strength this year. And last year, as a whole, that group was a weakness. It was Will Dissly and everyone else.
Underwhelming.
Right? And Will Dissly, so much outperformed what we ever expected from him. And that's not an indictment on him.
And what the Chargers expected from him, to be quite honest.
What was after him, man? Like, you know what I'm talking about? We're talking about, Hayden Hurst that didn't really work out. You're talking about Tucker Fisk, who obviously had a very minimal impact. You're talking about Eric Tomlinson. You're talking about guys off the street for the most
Stone
part.
Smart,
you know
who had very little
Stone
impact.
Smart, obviously, too. Yeah, I mean, he was a nice surprise and had some moments for sure. And
towards the end,
But, like, limited in his own way, too. Like, this is a much more fleshed out room. Like, I would be surprised if Aronde Gadsden had as small of a year as Stone Smart did last year.
Oh,
and he's tied in 3. He's tied in 3 right now.
I
so
know.
when you have the two, and another thing, reason why you don't have to be as concerned about Aronde Gadsden's blocking right away, because you have 2 other guys in that room that can do it, and one of them's the best in the league. So you can make it work. Greg Roman has everything he needs in that room to have that be a huge strength of this team in 2025 and going forward. But we still have more to get into, including Andy Bischoff giving kind of a little nugget that maybe put Scott Matlock's job in jeopardy, at least as far as him being a fullback. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. We still have more great stuff to get into. Thank you to all the everydayers out there, as always, for checking us out and being here, especially throughout the entire offseason. We appreciate you guys always being back, and sorry for the lack of shows the last few days. We still will never not hit 3 shows a week during this time period, but we just had some extenuating circumstances that forced us to have to start this week on Tuesday. But we will get back to buy or sell tomorrow, so hit us up at Locked On LAC on YouTube, on Instagram, to give us all of your questions or your buy or sells for tomorrow's show, and we will get them on there. But as always, thank you for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, as they keep you up to date with everything going around the entire league and make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Scott Matlock, David, one of the more interesting names on this roster for sure. I mean, obviously he's just kind of a fun player, and we knew that from the moment he stepped on the field and said he was going to, snatch souls and go take a grown man's job and all those things. But it was pretty enlightening hearing Andy Bischoff talk about Scott Matlock, especially about his role as a fullback, because he was very non-committal about, how many snaps he would play offensively this year. But this was the quote from him. He said, "Scott wants to be a Pro Bowl defensive tackle, and I want to support that. We want to support that as a staff. He has visions of himself being an elite defensive player. We have visions of him helping us on offense and how that all works together," which I think really kind of muddies the water, David, on what we can expect from him this year, because he played more offense than he did defense last year. And not only that, but like down the stretch of the season, like his defensive snaps totally dropped off of a cliff. And he was the Chargers' basically full-time fullback. Now, they use their fullbacks in different ways, and they're kind of also tight ends too, which is why you hear Andy Bischoff talking about it. But there seems to kind of be some conflict here, David, where, I mean, obviously, money-wise, you're going to make a lot more as a defensive tackle than you are a fullback. But I think more than that, it's just how kind of competitive that room has gotten all of a sudden, where it's like, man, I don't know if he can take time away if he still wants to play on this defensive line with all the guys they have in that room now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he wasn't particularly effective as a defensive tackle last year either. And so I think that's as big and as much to do with it as the other bodies that are also in that room. And I also, for the other side of the token here, do feel like he got better and better as a fullback as the season went on. The blocks were definitely a lot more effective. Like he was, even able to catch the football out of the flat a couple of different times. Like he actually got better. You saw it before your own eyes. I don't really ever think I saw any kind of, real effectiveness as a defensive tackle. And I think that's where things are going to get really difficult for him. I understand it also from a financial perspective, but that's clear and obvious. But he has to be able to make this team as a defensive tackle and be able to be a guy that can make a difference and be that Pro Bowl type guy. That is going to take a gigantic leap in that part of what he brought to the table from last year to this year.
Scott Matlock hasn't been a special fullback, right? He hasn't been a special defensive tackle. What's made him special is the versatility, the fact that he will play both, the fact that he also contributes in a big way on special teams as well. Like the fact that he's doing all 3 things is what made him the Travis Hunter before Travis Hunter. No, but this is my thing. And I think this is where the dilemma comes in, is just like, if he's just a defensive tackle and he's not bringing the added value of also giving you some snaps on offense, like, are we sure he can make this team as just a defensive tackle? And the other part of it is, it's like, it's really hard to kind of track his progression as a defensive tackle when he's over there trying to learn the offensive playbook and trying to do both. Like, that is, the questions people had about Travis Hunter, obviously to a much bigger, like in a much bigger way, was just like,
Yeah.
You can't be in both meetings at once. You can't be in every defensive meeting and offensive meeting in the same day. It doesn't work like that. But if it's hard not to think that him going and running around on offense hasn't taken away from some of his progression as a defensive tackle and a guy that we liked coming out of Boise State, a double-digit sack guy as a junior at Boise State. This is a dude who had, real pass rush chops in a defensive line that doesn't right now. There is no kind of clear interior pressure guy that you feel like you can count on going into the season. So it is quite a dilemma, but I would say, hey, the kind of scary thing about saying you want to put all of your eggs in the defensive line basket is there's a lot of dudes and not a lot of spots. I mean, it's a numbers game. It's kind of like the receivers. Like, you can talk about Jalen Reagor until the cows come home. How do you make the numbers work unless you're cutting a Darius Davis or a Quentin Johnston or one of your two rookies? Because Mike Williams and Lyle McConkey are pretty locked in my opinion.
Yeah.
Same thing with the defensive tackle room. I mean, now you have Deshaun Hand, Naquan Jones, Tier Tart, Justin Aboigbe, Tito Abonia, Jamari Caldwell, who you just drafted, and then Scott Matlock. That's 7 dudes. I don't think they're keeping 7 defensive
Somebody ain't gonna make it.
And that very well could be Tito, right? Justin Aboigbe, if he can't make a big improvement, maybe he's on the chopping block as well. But we're talking about a 6th-round pick in Scott Matlock from a different regime. So, he has to be better as a defensive tackle, because the only reason it's cute that he's a fullback is because he can also play defensive tackle too. Because, like I said, he's not Patrick Ricard. He's not a Pro Bowl fullback. No. But he brings so many things and wears so many hats. So it does seem, Andy Bischoff's telling you, we see him offensively as a player that we want to help our offense.
Yeah.
He's the one that thinks he can be a Pro Bowl defensive tackle. I think that there's a lot kind of to read in between the lines there. But there's one thing that is very clear, and you don't have to kind of think about ulterior motives, David, and that's the fact that this has to be good news for Steo Clots, who the path for potentially not just making the practice squad, which feels like he has a great shot at, but making the roster maybe becomes a little bit clear.
And Andy Bischoff, the tight end coach, is among a long line of people who have spoken very highly of Steo Clots. He said he will push people. This is the time of the year that probably a Steo Clots doesn't get a chance to really show his value because he's running around in shorts and a t-shirt. I mean, this is a physical guy from a tough, hard-nosed Iowa State team that is excited to put the pads on. And I think everybody has said that. And yeah, I mean, you watch the tape or you watch the film on Steo Clots, he's the guy that wants to knock the clots out of you. He wants to run you over. He wants to impose his will and kind of bring that physicality. He welcomes it. He enjoys it. And you can see that very clearly. And also, he went on to say that he has some tremendous special teams value as well. Well, guess what Scott Matlock was doing? He was playing fullback and also contributing on special teams. Seems like Steo Clots is primed and ready to potentially take that spot.
It's interesting because the thing is, like, the one thing the coaching staff loves about Scott Matlock is just the sheer size that he brings to the table, which he has Steo Clots by probably 60 pounds,
sure.
Right? It's very different. It's a different kind of fullback. Like, this is someone, like Bischoff said, you can run 3 positions. He can be Y, he can be F, he can be a fullback, all those things, which brings the versatility. It doesn't bring the sheer size, right? And the sheer just like, we're going to overpower you. Now, he's a very physical blocker. And we said 2 weeks ago when he had, 5 catches in training camp, it's like, wow. The reason it's a wow moment is because the dude had like 9 catches his entire collegiate career and had 5 catches in 1 OTA. Obviously, at a slower tempo, but it's like, man, if this dude's getting Andy Bischoff to light up at a press conference in the middle of June, right, before you get the pads on, man, that's really, really, really bodes well for what he can, his chances.
Yeah, they're basically saying get your popcorn ready because he's about to light it up when the pads come on.
I mean, that's the thing that gets you excited when you're talking about Steo Clots, right? It was him putting people in the dirt, and I mean, he's probably going to get on some people's nerves during training camp with just how physical he is. So I like Derwin James and some other guys we've talked about. You have to know when to kind of tone it back a little bit, but you'd rather have to rein someone in then try to bring it out of them. Going back to the, full circle with what Andy Bischoff said. If you have the willingness, we can work with it, and we'll find a way to use you as long as you're in it. Steve Clots has the willingness and is a more technical blocker than Scott Matlock is, and is a better receiver than Scott Matlock is. So, man, if I don't blame Scott Matlock for wanting to try to make it work and focus more on the defensive line side of things. But man, Steve Clots definitely stock up for him, and that's something we'll get into too. Is just kind of the offseason stock up, stock down. Stock up Steve Clots, stock up Oronde Gadsden for sure. Stock down Keandre Lambert-Smith because he hasn't been out there so far. But yeah, it's interesting, man. He's an exciting player and someone we're all going to fall in love with, and someone that we're going to, see get a bunch of snaps, especially with an extra preseason game. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it. And also, maybe the path to a roster spot isn't as far away as we think, because it feels like he's already a lock for the practice squad. Maybe we're underselling him in that way, because you can tell this is a dude that not only Jim Harbaugh likes, but also your tight end coach really likes a lot too, and was effusive and said, hey, he's going to push people. And I don't think he's talking about physically. I think he's talking about push people for a roster spot potentially. But really good stuff. Say what you will about Andy Bischoff and his hyperbole and just kind of raising the standard on what you think someone could be. Said some really good stuff and was very enlightening in his press conference today. Also, Aronde Gadsden, Trey Harris all said some really good stuff today. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news about missing yesterday is we'll be back with you guys tomorrow doing our buy or sell we wanted to do on Monday. So make sure you hit us up at Locked On LAC to give us your buy or sell, or at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, or on the YouTube post that we put out, or on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. All places you can get the show every single day. But the best way to make sure you don't miss it is subscribing and following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from. And also, David, just so much off-season stuff we still have planned. A lot of great stuff, including interviews we have coming up and any other practices. If we get anything else from the rookie OTAs this week, we'll bring it to you guys. And interesting that Jim Harbaugh just let all the vets kind of go home early. But still so much to get into, still many more shows to do. But thank you guys for checking out today's show. We're very excited about what these rookies could end up doing. But we'll be back with you guys tomorrow with Buy or Sell Wednesday. Until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.